Okay, so moving along, I'm here to discuss the lens. All of your life, all of from the moment that you entered this world, you've been accumulating experiences. You've been accumulating perceptions, perceptions as well as experiences. When I say perceptions, I want you to think of this. How is it that, like in my family, 7 children came from my mom and my dad, and those 7 children had a very distinct individual perspective of our parents' marriage, of our family life, right? So, in other words, they all came from the same DNA. They came from my parents, 7 of us, but yet we each have a very different perspective on the very things that were going on, like in the house that we were living in. Okay. So when my parents divorced, when they separated, actually, I was just in college. Um, how I perceived what was happening was probably far, far different than my younger sisters and my younger brothers who were still at home. Right. So perception is what gives us our lens, and that's based on our experiences, but not just the experience. It's our responsibility inside the experience. Wow. Okay. So inside of every experience, there is a responsibility. Someone is responsible. I happen to live from a filter that I've cleaned off enough that I actually prefer to be 100% responsible. Actually, I teach my clients 150% responsible. I've told them to be 1,000,000% responsible. Okay. Because when you come in and you take full responsibility, it allows you to see what happens or what is happening or what has happened. It allows you to see it more from the whole of the total of the different individuals involved, and not just from our own lens, our own ego, our own need to be right. So, relationship 101, the lens. Every person that you meet has that. Whether they came from a super happy family where their parents stayed together and they were married for 50 some years, right? 60 years. Or they came from maybe their parents never married, right? Maybe they were born into the world and they just had to make a go of it with their mom because, or their dad, because that was the parent that was caring for them. They were handling their own stuff while they were raising a child. Anywhere in between, right? You're going to meet people and they are here and they have their accumulated experience, and their perceptions are going to be based on that. Now, we can all be in the same room. We can all hear the same, we can hear the same words, but we will hear them from our perspective. And our perspective is our perception of what that person is saying. So one thing to remember in any relationship is that the other person, rarely is the other person going to see things the way that you see things. What's amazing and what increases this feeling of love, affinity, liking someone, is when that gap between how they're perceiving and how you're perceiving, when that gap is like this, when it's just an easy transition or an easy level of acceptance. It's easy to have a conversation. There isn't judgment, easily understood. When you find that, that's what makes for really good friendships. It makes for really good relationships. But just be aware, you will not have that with everyone. And the more that you can take responsibility for things that have occurred in your life, even when you feel like you were not the responsible party, the more you shift over to taking responsibility, the cleaner actually our lens gets, because we don't have this charge, unresolved issues. Even if they're kind of latent, they don't even have to be dynamically in our present, right? They can be something that happened and they've laid dormant, but they're there and they're influencing how we see things. So the more that we take responsibility and let go through forgiveness, the more our lens clears up. Just know, relationship 101, the lens, everybody's got one. And your lens isn't more right than their lens, right? Even though you see gaps, even though you know that that person could operate maybe at a higher level of, a higher level of emotional intelligence, right? Like less snappish, less being aggressive and asserting themselves, maybe even speak up more, right? Like become more communicative. Like those things you can see in that person. It's just in their journey, right? With whatever temperament they arrived here with, things came at them, they assimilated them based on the information or the data or what was present or what foundation they had up until that point. And it's kind of influencing them in how they see things, how much they trust, how open they are to communicate, how easily they accept others, accept differences, quote, agree to disagree, just accept. How about listen to someone, even though you don't think that you have, even though you don't think you share, or you don't share an opinion, how about just listening and gleaning something, even if it adds to your conviction, it just adds to your own conviction, or it might even shift it. It might alter it a little. You might go, something I should look into. Stay open. But that requires a lens that's clean. So when you catch yourself, like when you catch yourself starting to be judgmental or starting to be edgy or wanting to cut into or wanting to reject a person for the way they look or the way that they talk or the way that any of those things, right? We get along better in relationships, and you have a relationship with someone. Now, partner relationships, whoa, let's move that to even a higher level. How about parent-child relationships, right? Child-parent relationships, right? Those are all areas where the lens over time, the differences in the lens becomes quite pronounced. When kids are really, really little, they just tend to reflect you. But as they gain, as they grow, as they leave home and start going out for education and associating in peer groups, and their lens starts to evaluate and maybe even challenge some of what's happened or what they've been taught in their upbringing. It's a very we say the teenage thing. Just this happens, and it's part of things. And remembering, if you're a parent, just remembering, I mean, your child has every right to own whatever lens he wants to own. He has every right to the experiences, to the perceptions, to the perspective, all of that. Your spouse has every right. You have every right. But if we're going to get along, then we have to first understand that there's something to gain from the other person's perspective. What is it? Open ourselves up more, be less rigid. Relationship 101, the lens. Don't let your lens get in the way of happy relationships.